Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Talk Conversation Series, a peer knowledge resource by the CXOs for the CXOs. Now to our host, Kanika Goswami.
Hi, we welcome you to our podcast On Stage with Enterprise Thought Leaders. My name is Kanika Goswami and I'm the managing editor of On Media's B2B Enterprise Technology Publications. AI is shaking up the marketing world, and with the growing pressure on marketers to do more with less, it's easy to feel like they're falling behind. Insights presented in G2's research, the AI Marketing Mind 2025 Strategy for Intelligent B2B Customer Connection, breaks down how AI is driving up to 50% higher engagement and lays out 4 practical strategies that marketers are using right now to cut costs, retain customers, and grow faster. We got a chance to speak with the report's author, Victoria Blackwell, at Research Insights G2. Hi, Victoria. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kanika. Thank you so much for having me.
A quick introduction to Victoria before we move to the questions is she specializes in marketing and digital advertising software. Victoria began her career on Capitol Hill before transitioning into the private sector, where she developed expertise in program management and stakeholder engagements. Her journey took her through the high-growth B2C startups and global app platforms in Chicago and London, where she led innovative brand and marketing initiatives. Today, she leverages her cross-industry experience to deliver strategic insights and thought leadership that helps shape the future of marketing technologies. Victoria, could you share a little bit about the report before we move on to the questions?
Of course. Yeah. So our newest report, the AI Marketing Mind 2025, is definitely laden in B2B strategy. And I wrote it as a marketer for other marketers because I feel like a lot of the reports that we see out there just generally across the industry are very kind of like cut and dry without a lot of strategic takeaways from day one. And that's something that I would have liked to see in my early days as a marketer. It's like, I have all this new technology, all of these things are changing so quickly, but how can I change now and how can I make it work for me? And that's kind of like really how I looked at it when I was writing this. So if you're a marketer out there, I hope you enjoy it because I wrote it for you.
So what would you identify as the top 3 emerging trends in real-world MarTech applications? We are assuming AI is top, or at least what about the others?
So I think one of the things that I'm really seeing across all emerging trends, obviously there's an AI focus, but the top 3 for marketers specifically are very much AI-driven personalization at scale. AI generated video content creation, as well as predictive analytics that kind of really roll into churn prevention and intent detection. But one of the ones that I think that is really creating more of not just a trend, but I think a real cultural reset, if you will, is the AI generated video and multimedia content. I am a firm believer that how your content is presented to your customers, what sets you apart. And you could have the most incredible brand, the most incredible product. And if you don't have the brand connection to your consumer, for what? Like it leaves so much to be desired. And in my early days of B2C, I've always thought that B2C should be very much kind of the milestone look ahead for how brands should market to their customers. And if B2B marketed like B2C, I feel like there would be such a shift in the way that consumers perceive B2B products. And I think the AI generation, multimedia, all of these things that are kind of on the horizon with these emerging trends is definitely going to be how AI content creation can set you apart. So, and that's actually one of the bigger predictions in the report that I really focus on, and I think it's going to make a huge impact.
So how do these cater to the evolving customer engagement strategies? There are tools, there are strategies, but how do CMOs put them to best use so that they can, get the best advantage out of them?
For sure. So I think kind of like the advantage is knowing where your customer is at and what they want and kind of really before they want it, to be honest. And that's kind of the real jewel about AI is that it is helping everyone across the board from a junior employee to a CMO understand how adaptive content, emotionally intelligent touch points, and kind of knowing when a customer is leaning towards a competitor or when tools shift engagement from reactive to proactive. those are really things that kind of align with today's demand for real-time relevance. And that is one of the things that I think is very much evolving with engagement strategies, because it creates not only the drive, but the opportunity to succeed without kind of wondering where you should be going and what you should be doing with this type of engagement. Because as long as you're connected with your customer, you have kind of this, light at the end of the tunnel to guide you, which I think is, always been at the forefront of marketing. The customer is always king, and we say that for a reason. But with all of these kind of just like evolving customer strategies, it very much is easier than ever to know kind of what your customer is thinking and where they're at, especially with the help of AI.
And it also, I think it's a huge support for personalization, which is a big deal when it comes to B2C marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's just not enough anymore to
Mhm.
like, hey, first name. Like it's just not enough.
Mhm.
And I think that the thing about the customer is that they're just as smart as we are, if not smarter. So we need to start thinking about them as an intelligent consumer, regardless of what the campaign is, because they've seen it all. And they might also
Yeah.
be marketers themselves and think piece of marketing is very much, like I said earlier, knowing where your customer is at and what they expect of you. They expect to be wowed. They expect to have this really unique experience, which sets you apart. And that I think is something that needs to be drilled in a little bit more. It's not as cut and dry as it was 10 years ago. It's changed, and I think in the best way.
That is so right. A little more in detail about how you think AI adds value here.
For sure. So I think of AI kind of as like the connective tissue between data and decision making. Like it's a
Mhm.
guide. Like it very much is a coach in every sense of the word, because it helps reduce guesswork. And it also kind of transforms like this raw, difficult, siloed data into really actionable next steps, which if you even if you're a novice AI user or a power user of AI, if you kind of know how to really dynamically adapt it to what you're trying to achieve, it's very much takes away the automation piece to more anticipation, so that you can be more prepared and create much more actionable steps, which is very much kind of the AI value at its most basic really relevance, because you can do so much with it. It just depends on, do you have an actionable AI strategy to take you where you need to go? And you can do that with a lot of different methods. It just, you need to figure out what works for you.
So, my next question is, what role does data play in these evolving tools and strategies? Of course, for using AI, you need to have high quality and good quantities of data.
Absolutely.
How do you think CMOs are handling it, and what are the tools that they can use to make sure that their AI tools have the requisite amount and quality of data?
Yeah, so the tools piece I think is so relevant here, because data is absolutely the fuel to kind of understanding just not only the most basic of information, but how you can accelerate whatever strategy you're trying to implement. And from a tool perspective, I think one of my biggest takeaways, especially through my research and through my own existence as a marketer, is that not so much a tool, but more so a mindset that data may be siloed, and you have to bring it out of that silo and understand where all your data sits in order to create the most, like, not only actionable but effortless approach to kind of understanding how and why data is going to put you ahead of the game. Because you could be collecting all the live long day, it living in a CDP somewhere that you don't really know how to create actionable insights from it. But if you really dedicate the time and the energy to removing that silo and understanding how all these different pieces of data really do make a difference, it creates a much more, I would say, more of a thriving environment for AI. Because when it's fed integrated and real world data, especially like in the like marketing, sales, support, like data coverage areas, it creates such a better story. And like anytime that you're writing a story, you want to have a beginning, middle, and an end, right? So having all of these data points removed from siloed, whether it be storage or different teams have so much data, sales teams, marketing teams, that they don't integrate and isn't accessible. So that is probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I could offer in terms of either tool or strategy, is that get that data unified and understand where it makes the most sense to unify it so all teams can use it.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and this is a kind of um, an overarching question. What would you think is the single biggest takeaway from this research that CMOs can use as a learning for their MarTech deployments? We've talked about tools, we've talked about technologies. There has to be a binding factor in terms of strategies and deploying those tools tactically. What would you say is the biggest thing that they should watch out for and, of course, be prepared for as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is very much the perfect example of that CMOs don't need to boil the ocean. Like there is so many places that you can start. And I think for the immediate answer would obviously be for me to start small but scale fast. Understand like what your biggest pain point area is. And in one of the predictions in AI Marketing Mind, we actually have kind of this like pathway of AI integration. And the first step of it is to audit, to understand like where you need AI the most, where you need from at least from my research perspective, where you need to automate, where you need to implement. And it makes a big difference if you start with the full map in front of you rather than working with bits and pieces of what you think because of the latest fire drill or the latest conversation with the board, whatever that may mean to you. It will only work if you put it in an actionable area that you can see difference, even if the difference is small, because from a small difference, you can make a big impact. And it doesn't have to be some budget changing, product annihilating type of change. It can very much be at the internal level. It can be at the most basic, and you can still create this competitive edge so that 2025 won't come from being all flashy with AI, but you'll be consistent and you'll be customer first.
So I was just curious about this, and you can take a few moments to think and then answer. Europe, EU just had some AI regulations put in place. I think so did the US market. Is this in any way going to impact how CMOs will deploy AI for their marketing purposes, you think?
Absolutely. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
that also crosses the line of personalization as well. And we've
Yeah.
seen, even with the depreciation of third-party cookies, that is something that I think
Mm.
really kind of turned the brain on for, excuse me, on how we're looking to a cookieless future that is also very much privacy laden, and
Yeah.
using that kind of a would even say baby step into understanding why it is so important that privacy is at the forefront, because privacy in itself really is personalization. The customer is smart. They know that they don't need to be like pressing a cookie banner every time they go to a new site. That ruins the journey. It ruins the experience, right? So with all of these new, especially from a GDPR perspective, I think that the EU has really been ahead of the game in terms of what customers expect. And I think now it's kind of trickling more into the US. But I feel like a lot of the quotes that I've been seeing are around unacceptable risk. And that to me, from an EU perspective, is that they have been ahead of the unacceptable risk as much as they could have when it came to cookies. So I am very curious, kind of like especially when it comes to like general purpose AI models, what the implementation will be, because it's going to be phased. Like everything that I've read, we're starting in 2026, we're moving to 2027. And I think my advice would be to use AI ethically. And in my past work, I've talked about ethical advertising when it's come to cookieless futures, and how AI is actually one of the first implementation tools to really get personalized information without sacrificing the privacy of users, which has really, I think, shaped how this ethical advertising and moving into ethical AI is what is going to set these companies who aren't maybe using AI ethically. That will come back to bite you in some way or another. We're not sure exactly what that looks like yet, but I think starting with caution and proceeding with that ethical piece is really what's going to set you apart.
So AI ethics is one part of it. What about AI biases? Do you think they're also going to have an impact on marketing strategies? I mean, geographically, sector-wise, demographically, there would be some impact, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I think a big piece of it is also AI literacy. Because regardless of whatever the novice or the super user, having this gap in understanding how and where it can be used is I hate to say dangerous, but it can be if there isn't a lot of AI training or AI understanding or implementation ethics when it comes to across just like the company. And a lot of people aren't really thinking about that because I want to say that in the greatest sense, AI is absolutely a coach. It can be an absolute amplifier for incredible work, but it can also be some prohibited practices depending on what you're using it for. And I feel like there's not a lot of education. And I think the education piece is really what's going to set businesses apart and even individuals apart on how they utilize and implement AI within their own spheres. Because soon I think we will be seeing a lot of use cases. We've seen early ones, right? We've seen um, plagiarizing research papers, doctors getting using it to diagnose and all of these things. And, that's why chat has that disclaimer. It's like, we're not always right. Double check your work. That's the tip of the iceberg in understanding kind of where that will sit for the future. So I think a big piece of that is very much investing in literacy, like AI literacy, and how important it is to really take the time to educate your people if you're going to be implementing AI aggressively.
And then one small last thing, just because we should discuss it. We've talked about data privacy and how EU has regulations in place. GDPR is there, and the US also has regulations. Do you think there's going to be any threat to data privacy with too much of AI tools being deployed? Do you think there's a risk of overuse that might spill over into the security realm?
I think like any new technology, there's risks, right? When they first invented radar and Bluetooth, they were like, "Oh my gosh, we're cooked. We will never be able to send a sub again. We will never be able to have the objective sneak on the enemy." Like all of these things are very much kind of like early days. We worry about the worst case scenario, right? There's of course a chance that it will leak within the privacy realm. There is of course a chance that there will be bad actors who use AI for nefarious purposes. But in the same breath, it's still a technology that is hopefully going to do more harm, or hopefully doesn't do more harm than good. And we have to, I think, as researchers, marketers, scientists, data scientists, really anyone who works within that tech realm has to be very vigilant and to ensure that they're not bad actors and to ensure that, we're using a tool for good. And that I think is hopefully going to be the attempt and the hope of everyone who's using AI, but of course there's a chance. I feel like I would be remiss if I said never, kind of like a never. But hopefully it will be regulated enough to and understand enough to make sure that anyone who's using it for, my prompts are very help me rephrase this or help me bring this visual to life based on this information, so I'm not doing anything nefarious with any AI, and I'm hoping no other marketer is. But in the same breath, I always say that would be better to be cautious rather than crazy. So fingers crossed.
And you did speak about education and keeping people aware
Absolutely.
when it comes to the use. So that will help.
Absolutely. Yeah, that literacy piece I think is going to be huge, especially in the next, I would say, like 2 to 3 years for sure.
Right. So that brings us to the end. And thank you so much, Victoria, for your time. We didn't take too much time, I hope.
No, my gosh, not at all. Thank you so much. This is one of the things that I love talking about, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. Please do follow us on social media for regular updates and new content.